Hello again, my darlings, and that includes any new great-grandchildren that might have bobbed up since we did part 1. Apart from the bits about my childhood, I hope that you now want to find out about how to achieve more by ensuring that your unique qualities blend with other unique parts of the whole universe to enhance the big picture. It's a bit like that Goldilocks jigsaw, do you remember? In part 2, I'll say more about the nature of consciousness and talk about how I interact with Big C and what benefits follow. Now, till now, I've thought that the benefits only flowed from Big C to me. But not so, apparently. Only today, January the 16th, 2023, I learned from Professor Brian Swim in a webinar entitled Cosmogenesis that the universe not only benefits from interacting with us, but actually needs to. This is what he said. Nature's unfolding truth emerges only with the active participation of the human mind. Nature's unfolding truth emerges only with the active participation of the human mind. I need to ponder that quite a lot. But it does encourage me to further encourage you to learn about and cherish the voice that whispers within, that helps you see the best choices to make, not only for personal benefit, but that will also enhance nature's unfolding towards its ultimate perfection. So if you're ready, let's move on. And if not, wait until you're ready. This is the electromagnetic energy field that tells all nature how to be. It's the playground and the school that nurtures our becoming and enriches our meaning. So let's play and learn. Now, the science I learned in school taught me that everything was made from atomic particles. In my 80s, I learned that consciousness is the ground of all being. This means that in fact, it is actually consciousness that creates the atoms that form everything else. Materialist scientists are still wrestling with this startling finding. Each of us and every other physical thing was created by consciousness. We and all physical stuff are envisaged as being here. It's not a place with a boundary. It's a way of grouping all physical things that take up space and have a start and a finish time. You know, people are born and die. Trees rot. Plants decay. Rocks erode. It happens in this space, and it's happening all through time. That's why all physical things are said to exist in space-time. Now, the constraints of space-time limit the scope of our experience of being, our so-called immanent reality. Now, you'll know that we all have experiences beyond the physical, like ideas, for example. We have a problem. We see a possibility that might solve it. We try it. It works. The question really is, where did the idea come from? We often hear, we just had the idea, out of the blue, so to speak. Well, not quite. We actually just saw the possibility. Yes, out of the blue maybe, from outside space-time, in the unconstrained, transcendent reality of Big C consciousness, where possibilities dance in a metaphorical ballroom that quantum researcher Werner Heisenberg called potentia. But before we explore this topic further, it'll help to overview some of the fundamental quantum physics findings. In the late 1600s, scientists had different ideas about what light was made of. One view saw it as a string of tiny particles that Newton called corpuscles, and another where light was seen to be formed as a wave. In the 1900s, quantum physicists found that all matter, not just light, exhibits the properties of both options, particles and waves, but only for some of the time. So how come? Here's how. A single photon, that's the smallest possible speck of light, behaves as a particle when it's being observed and as a wave when it's not. It goes like this. No, it's not a dog with a wet nose. It's a photon being observed in the laboratory. It's a particle in a specific place. It stays put until the observation ceases. Then its wave aspect emerges, expands and continues to expand and dance about freely until further observation is made, whereupon the wave collapses, so-called, into a photon at the spot where the wave stopped dancing. Again, it stays put until observation ceases, and its wave aspect re-emerges, expands, and continues to expand and dance off again, only to collapse in particle form when observed, and so on. That's what quantum objects do. Now that principle applies to all structures at the micro-quantum level, but at the macro level, big structures, the recovery is so sluggish that the objects appear to be stable. Your stuff won't vanish when you stop looking at it. Now let's get back to look at potentia. Here we are again in transcendent reality, the conscious awareness that is outside space-time. Potentia is the metaphoric ballroom where all quantum objects dance about when they are behaving as waves. They are known as waves of possibility. They are potential particle somethings. They dance about waiting to be noticed, and when observed, they collapse into particular physical things that materialize in immanent reality, as so-called events of actuality. Now you'd be forgiven for thinking that the collapse somehow gets launched from the transcendent reality to land in immanent reality as the thing. But not so. Immanence is not a place where stuff could land, so to speak. It's a state of being wherein collapsed possibility waves spontaneously appear as their actualities. Let's compare how classical physics and quantum physics do things differently. In the physical world, in immanent reality, classical physics assures us that in shifting material stuff from point A to point B, two things are involved. Firstly, the stuff has to travel all the way. Its path is continuous. Secondly, it takes energy, whether it's muscle, petrol engine or whatever. Quantum physics tells a different story. Here's the setup. A is in transcendent reality. Now, when a quantum object in wave form collapses at A, it will appear at B in particle form at a random location in space-time reality as a spontaneous event. Nothing travels between A and B. No travel means that no energy is required, nor is there a continuous path to navigate. The shift is said to be discontinuous. Now, A and B are a random distance apart, not at the same address, so to speak, so the event is said to be non-local. Non-locality is defined as the transfer of information or influence at a distance without path, that's without travel, or without signal, without energy. Put that all together and you've got a discontinuous, non-local collapse, better known as a quantum leap. A spontaneous event from something or other in state A to that thing in state B in different form. In human experience, a quantum leap would be hate spontaneously giving way to forgiveness, or confusion to insight and the like. We tend to call quantum leaps miracles. Goswami suggests that a quantum leap is an act of grace, an expression of the divine. Researchers have grouped waves of possibility that perform 4 different functions. Each has a role to play in our well-being. They are called supramental intellect possibilities, mental possibilities, vital energy possibilities, and physical possibilities. And here we are with our brain tucked between our ears. Our brain is the link whereby we interact with consciousness to experience things and events. There is a permanent non-local linkage between them and us, even when our ego distracts us from that awareness. More about that later. Let's start with the familiar, physical possibilities. We, everybody else, and volumes of other physical matter are here in the immanent domain. That's thanks to the discontinuous non-local collapse of the unique wave of possibility that encoded our personal identity. Now we use our 5 senses to distinguish what is me from what is not me. All the stuff that's not me is referred to as the gross outer material world. Now, life is about finding the best way of being in that material world. The three non-physical possibilities, shown yellow, help us find and manage the best way to be. They are seen as layers or bodies of consciousness within transcendence. They are the supramental intellect body, the mental body, and the vital energy body. The supramental intellect body offers guidance, tuition, in becoming fully human, that we might be expressions of the archetypical qualities that are sourced from love, that are grounded in truth that underpins justice and reflects beauty, goodness, wholeness, and abundance. It's from this source that we intuit. We gain new insights, fresh inspiration, increased wisdom. The mental body houses all possible thoughts that we ever had, are having, or could have. This body encourages us to think about what our thoughts actually mean. Positive conclusions increase our energy. Negative conclusions drain our energy. The vital body monitors the ups and downs in our overall vitality and triggers the emotions that we feel in relation to those ups and downs. It's our emotions that influence the health and well-being of our physical bodies. Positive emotions promote health. Negative emotions lead to sickness. Now, the three transcendent bodies collaborate to make up our unique, subtle, so-called inner psyche. That is, the internal experience that we have of the gross outer material world. The interaction between all four possibilities, the subtle and the gross, is both unique and lifelong for each of us. I can happily say that in my recent exploration of these possibilities has enriched my life by trusting intuitions, by intentionally inviting fresh ideas when I get stuck, and by applying a simple truth test that we'll talk about later. Now, I've not detailed the mechanics of the vital energy function, but if you wanted to, you could watch a YouTube that I've called Consciousness, Mind of God and Creativity at the address shown. From about 20 minutes in, it leads into how this stuff behaves when a couple that I've created called Flo and Joe Blow have a little domestic tiff. That's just an aside. Let's push on and look at how the brain, between your ears, can bring benefit from these possibilities. The theoretical information discussed so far is useful, but not necessary to actually benefit from interacting with Big C consciousness. So I'm going to talk about what I think, what I do, and what happens when I seek help from Big C. My first thought is to declare to myself that I know that my mind is nested in universal mind. But I also know that my busy ego masks that awareness. So I then declare my intention to focus on aligning my mind with universal mind. To do that, I recall the qualities of universal mind. Divinity, the spark within that enlightens. Love, I go within to feel its empowerment. Wisdom, I trust its bounty. And truth, I seek its precision. I've learned that divinity and love will open up my experience beyond the limitations of the material world. They expand the context, so to speak. I've also learned that after I have declared my need, wisdom and truth will enlighten me. They enrich the content, so to speak. I know that my ego is still sufficiently active to raise occasional doubts, but I'll discuss how I manage that uncertainty later. It'd be rather nice if it was as easy as this. But it's not. It's gentler. The intimacy is mind to mind. The big requirement seems to be that to become aware of new insights, I need to be quiet within and sort of joyfully expectant. Let's look at some specifics. I need help when I'm stuck and need a solution that is both ethical and beneficial. That's because divinity doesn't do daggy deals. Now, wisdom knows how and why I'm stuck. I don't have to spell out the problem. I can just say, even in my head, what's my best way out? I then wait quietly and expectantly. In that sacred presence, I somehow feel worthy of an answer, and then a workable possibility comes to mind. It's an enlightening aha moment, out of the blue, so to speak. A quantum leap, a spontaneous shift from confusion to clarity. I find that once I've seen the possibility, I can mostly figure out how to implement it. But if not, I just ask, what's my best first step? Now sometimes several possibilities emerge. And here's a new question. How can I tell which of several options is truly the best? What is the truth? And how can you tell what's true? My dictionary defines truth as, firstly, the body of real things, events and facts, that is, actuality. And secondly, it's the state of being the case. That's a fact. Now that seems obvious enough, but not thorough enough. If truth could be described in layers, then my bottom line would be that truth is that which emanates from and resonates with universal mind. This declares the essence of truth, its source, and its harmonious relationship with universal mind. Now, resonance creates energy, so truth energizes. It strengthens. In the absence of truth, the energy boost is just not there, it's absent. So falsity will remain weaker. In functional terms, we can say falsity weakens. And here is one of creation's pretty fancy initiatives. Truth energizes the muscles in our body, and falsity does not. You can play with this and test it out for yourself if you want. Here's how. Get a friend to hold their arm out level with the ground. Then ask them to resist your pressure in a way that their arm stays level. Then ask them to tell you what day it is. Let's say it's Monday. Apply the same pressure while they say today is Monday. Their arm will stay horizontal. Then ask them to say any day but Monday. Test again with the same pressure while they say today is Friday or some other non-Monday. You're almost always able to push their arm down fairly easily. You see, they were not energized because that was a false call. The practice of muscle testing as a diagnostic tool is called kinesiology. It's used to detect and correct imbalances that may relate to stress, nutrition, minor injuries, or causing some disease in the body. Now, it's a bit tricky trying to ask your own question and pump your own arm to conduct a truth test. But there's an easy way to test solo that's been called divining since ancient times. It's a way of finding underground water. The diviner holds a forked branch like this, walks over the ground, asking in his mind, is there water underground here? If there is, the rod moves in a consistent way that the operator recognizes. Truth does the energizing. The diviner can't feel his muscles doing it at all. The Catholic Church damned the practice of divining as satanic. However, in 1568, St. Teresa was offered a site to build a new convent. It was a great spot, but there was no water supply. Then Friar Antonio bobbed up, twig in hand, walking about a bit, and then said, dig here. And bingo, and I quote the result. A plentiful fount of water gushed forth, excellent for drinking, copious for washing, and it never ran dry. They called it a miracle. The Church bent its own rules about divining. Reductionist science dismiss it. Nature persists with it. Farmers engage its specialists and value its output. Through time, those twigs have been replaced by bent wire or by a simple pendulum. Now, I find it useful to use a pendulum, not for locating water, but to determine the truth of any given proposition or statement. Here's how. We have already seen that our minds can tune in to the electromagnetic energy field of consciousness that is universal mind, the mind in which our minds are nested. But that's usually by intention to override ego preoccupations. Now let's also note that our bodies can detect the energy without normally being aware of it. However, we can choose to link to that energy by simply dangling a pendulum from our fingers. If you need to, you can make a simple pendulum with a threaded needle and a cork from a bottle. To get to know how it works, hold the pendulum in your preferred hand and dangle it over the palm of the other hand and say, "Show me a yes." In my case, the pendulum always rotates clockwise to say yes, to signal a truth. Then cross-check by saying, "Now show me a no." In my case, the pendulum always rotates anti-clockwise to signal falsity, non-truth. We must each establish and remember our own polarity. There are only two options. It's either clockwise for yes, or it's clockwise for no. Just remember it. If nothing happens after several attempts, put your free hand near your belly button. Proximity to the energy at the solar plexus can help. Don't lose heart if things don't work immediately. Doubting that you can do it will make it harder. Once you've got your measure, make statements that you really know the answer to, like, "My name is David," and the like. It'll give you confidence. I find that when I'm focused, I somehow knowing that a wisdom helps me to sharpen up the statement to be tested or the question to be put. Now, watch out for yourself if you find yourself thinking something like this when you put a question. "Gee, I hope it says yes. I really don't want to know on this one." That's your ego wanting its own way. We'll see how to manage that influence later on. But for now, here's another significant thing that I have for truth testing. It's a health issue. Quite often, I wake up with a pain in my left chest. I've no idea what the onset of a heart problem feels like, but at my age, I guess it's on the cards. On the first occasion, I panicked a bit, thought the worst, and I wondered about calling an ambulance and more. I didn't want to know. My ego wanted to deny it. But I needed to know. So I got my pendulum out and asked, "Do I have a heart condition?" It rotated anti-clockwise. That put ego back in its box, and my mind recognised that it's a no. So what then? A thought sprang to mind. Try indigestion. So I asked, "Do I have indigestion?" It rotated clockwise. My mind recognised that as a yes. Okay, it was indigestion. I'll have a sip of Gavison and not gulp me breakfast. It's simple, but note the benefits. Supramental truth banishes fear. Negative mental thoughts evaporate. The vital energy body remains stable. Hence, there's no negative reaction in my physical body. I get the same sensation often, without negative consequences. But if perchance my ticker does start to pack up, I know that I will be given clear notice and that I can check out my next best step. Let's look at some additional thoughts related to truth testing. You need to know that a pendulum is not a predictor. Future truths are yet to emerge. Lotto numbers and the like are yet to be published. Sports results only become facts after the siren. Attempts at predicting outcomes will trigger oscillations between 12 o'clock and 6 o'clock, like this. That's a clear 50-50 signal. Your team might win, or it might not. It could even be a draw. Now, I've mentioned a couple of times that it's possible, for my ego at least, to influence a particular outcome. Here's the story. Research findings have linked our level of awareness of the bounty of Big C consciousness with our effectiveness in applying its benefits. The more aware we are of such abundance, the more we can trust it, the more we can achieve. According to researcher David Hawkins, only 4 people have ever been constantly and fully conscious in Big C consciousness. They are Krishna, Buddha, Zoroaster, and Jesus. They were fully human and divine, but not gods. Hawkins rates these 4 at 1,000 on a logarithmic scale of 0 to 1,000. My calibration is 735 on that scale. So I figure that I've got 265 points leeway gap for my ego to somehow distort a pendulum reading, especially when I've got my heart set on a particularly selfish outcome. I needed a way to verify my test results, so I asked, can you somehow signal a code that I can recognise that will assure me that the last response given was actually sourced in truth? This is what happened. The pendulum started oscillating between 11 o'clock and 5, then between 12 and 6, then 1 and 7, 2 and 8, 3 and 9, and so on. Notice the clockwise progression, and it falls back home between 11 and 5. That's the thing. I took that clockwise sequence as a yes to affirm the possibility of a code, and I saw these diagonal movements to be the code. At my core, I knew that the energy moving the pendulum was sourced from the divine truth of universal consciousness. I like to call it the mind of God. It's a nice link to my past. As fanciful as it may seem, I somehow saw this graphic from the previous slide as a giant wheel propelling the evolutionary progression of the universe towards its ultimate perfection. I saw this thrust as being energized by the collaborative learning between Big C consciousness and humanity's little c consciousness. Such imagery seems to fit Professor Brian Swim's declaration that nature's unfolding truth emerges only with the active participation of the human mind. What a challenge. What an opportunity. What a great way to be. This is a representation of Big C consciousness, universal mind. Recall that every human mind, little c consciousness, is seamlessly nested within its host, Big C consciousness. So here am I. My busy little c is chewing over a problem that I can't resolve. I suggest that means that my ego is masking my awareness of Big C. But I need help, so I intentionally focus on my enduring link to Big C. In a short while, as I recall the qualities of Big C, our minds begin to blend in a kind of serenity. I'm now able to easily swap notes with Big C. I'll dramatise a little to give a feel for how Professor Swim's notion of necessary participation could perhaps sound. But in reality, in this serene space, the toing and froing easily flows from mind to mind in silence. Anyway, here goes. Big C knows I'm stuck and presents a possibility that is both loving and true. I like the possibility. I have a nice aha moment and can see the benefits of its implementation. Big C reminds me that it needs human observation to collapse the possibility. I happily accept the job and wonder about its implementation. Big C assures me that it's on standby if I get stuck. To which I said, I know, I've learned to trust you. Each of us tells the other how helpful the interaction has been. Big C says, I know. It's called co-creation. It's necessarily a joint project. Well, my dears, I've done my best to share the why and the how of my recent interests through these two series. Yes, there's been a bit of trial and error thrown in, but almost always there's been fulfillment and a sense of joy. I just felt that I wanted to tell you that we are free to choose to be co-creators, project by project as they might come up, without any compulsion. It's our choice. So, my darlings, one and all, I'm near the end of my life in the immanent world. I will not know what you might glean from my musings, but from time to time I hope there may be some kind of recollection that will touch your heart, or cheer your spirit, or challenge your mind. Meanwhile, let's share the love that we feel each time we meet. Love energizes the universe.